We've been talking about the projection that we hear from the right about political violence. We're going to speak to David Newert on today's program about this issue of right-wing violence, among other things. But despite the right's claim that most political violence is on the left, the reality is that most political violence in the United States comes from the right against the left. And case in point, yesterday, George Soros, the billionaire philanthropist and sort of like favorite punching bag target of the right, responsible for absolute and utter evil, if you ask them, behind every conspiracy theory almost that they come up with, an explosive device was found in his mailbox. It wasn't just something that looked like an explosive. It was actually an explosive device that was proactively detonated by a bomb squad that was called. Police responded yesterday at 3:45 to his house. An employee had opened the mailbox, saw what looked like an explosive device. Soros wasn't even home. And this guy is sort of the darling target. Anti-Semites target George Soros because he's Jewish. Anti-liberals target George Soros because he uses his money to push leftist causes. Anti-anyone who backed Obama types attack George Soros because he's a rich guy who backed Obama. And extremists who use the threat of violence based on political beliefs, we typically call that terrorism, right? But typically you see hesitation to apply that term to incidents like this. And if you look at some of the enclaves on the internet where this issue is being discussed, they are celebrating it in all of the usual places on the internet. And then they are also moving to false flag conspiracies. George Soros had the device planted himself in order to make the right look bad, which is, of course, so stupid because you don't need false flags to make it seem as though the right are the purveyors of the overwhelming majority of political violence in the United States. Anecdotally, we've recently talked about Heather Heyer, who was run over and killed at that alt-right white supremacist march in Charlottesville. We've talked about numerous mass shootings with assault rifles by individuals motivated by right-wing ideology. We've talked about the cheering of body-slamming reporters by Republicans when they ask questions you don't like. That was the president of the United States cheerleading that, by the way. We've seen indifference to the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. But when the left interrupts Stephen Miller's sushi night or Sarah Huckabee Sanders' chicken meal at the Red Hen in West Virginia or Virginia, wherever it was, that's uncivil, Pat, and that's over the line. And if you kneel during the national anthem, it's also disrespectful. Tucker Carlson can't go to restaurants anymore. The right has almost a near monopoly on actual political violence. And it's really important, number one, don't be sucked into this false debate about where is it okay to protest. Is it okay to protest at sushi restaurants, or can you only protest political people doing horrible things at Indian restaurants? Don't fall for that false debate, and don't fall for the projection that the political violence comes from the left. I saw an Antifa video of somebody throwing a bike lock. Okay, well, left-wing terrorism was more prevalent in the 1960s. You had eco-terrorism, you had some animal rights extremism, mostly property damage, generally didn't target people. But we've had now more than 30 years of predominantly right-wing violence against actual people. Go back to the 1984 murder of Alan Berg, the liberal radio host. Look at domestic extremist murders in the United States. 74% are done by right-wingers. That doesn't even include those by ultra-conservative Islamic extremists. I argue it should. Any kind of violence motivated by religious fundamentalism of that kind, whether it's Muslim or Christian or Jew or whoever, it is right-wing by its very nature. We're not even including that, Pat. And 74% of political murders in the U.S. are done by the right.
Yeah, and I will say that liberals are doing a poor job at showing that violence on the right is much more prominent than violence by the left. And maybe that has to do with the fact that Republicans are in power now. So there's a lot of other things to go after. Like liberals will criticize, say, like the travel ban,
Okay.
or family separations, or Trump trying to gut the Affordable Care Act. So there's a lot of content there. There's a lot of more tangible things that liberals can go after.
I agree that that's true, but it's not like the left was successful at making it very clear that the majority of the political violence was on the right when Barack Obama was president.
Sure.
So I don't know that that's fully responsible for it. But still, the right will continue to say, no matter who's president, that it's liberals and Democrats who do the violence. And of course, they have no data to back that up whatsoever. The reason it matters is that you can't solve the problem if you allow them to misstate reality. And if you slice it any way that you want, the reality is that the overwhelming majority of political violence, extremist domestic political violence, is coming from the right, sometimes against moderates who aren't right enough, but overwhelmingly against people on the left, and we are going to continue talking about it. Today's program is sponsored in part by Blinkist.com/Pakman. If you've not already heard about Blinkist, it's amazing. It's an app for your phone, tablet, or web browser, and what they do is they take nonfiction books, popular nonfiction, critically acclaimed nonfiction, they condense the book into a 15-minute audiobook. You get all the most important information and insights from each book, but you can soak up the entire essence of the book in one sitting. I've listened to a ton of books on Blinkist. One recent one is Robert Reich's new book, The Common Good. Also Bunk by Kevin Young, useful in preparing me for the pseudoscience miniseries that we're producing. And if you are a David Pakman Show viewer or listener, you can get a 7-day free trial by going to Blinkist.com/Pakman. If you're watching on YouTube, use the link in the video description. After the free trial, if you like it, you can get the full access to thousands of condensed audiobooks for about $5 a month. That's BLINKIST.com/PAKMAN.